Good evening. A very cordial welcome to everyone tonight. My name is Peter Feind. I'm Professor for Agriculture and Food Policy here at Humboldt University at Berlin. And I'm very happy to welcome you to today's Cosmos lectures. Before I introduce our distinguished speaker today, Philippe Baret, I just want to give you a brief introduction to the Cosmos lectures. This is a public lecture series which carries on the tradition of Alexander von Humboldt's famous Cosmos lectures that he gave to students and the general public in Berlin starting in 1827-1828. Alexander von Humboldt aimed at a comprehensive, as he called it, physical description of the world. So the new Cosmos readings focused on the interactions between the physical world and human behavior. And we think that's quite a modern outlook that deserves to be further pursued. So natural scientists, social scientists, and scholars from the humanities analyze planetary environmental change in this lecture series, and they provide insights into current transformation and sustainability research. The lecture series was relaunched in 2019 to celebrate the 250th anniversary of Alexander von Humboldt's birthday, with a very high-level lecture, which was also attended by our federal president, Frank-Walter Steinmeier. The researchers in this series present their work in a generally understandable way, and I can promise that's going to happen today. And they invite participants to subsequent discussion. So we will have a lecture of about 45-50 minutes, and after that there's an opportunity for interaction. That's why we've got these chairs over here. So today's speaker is Philippe Baret. He's a professor of genetics, systems analysis, and agroecology at the Université de Louvain in Belgium. He holds an agricultural engineering degree and a PhD in quantitative genetics from the University of Louvain. He leads the Sutra research team, which is involved in various Horizon Europe projects and other Belgian research initiatives. Philippe has published significant papers in areas like agroecology, sustainability transition, and sustainability assessment. His research interests focus on the future of food systems, with a particular emphasis on the importance of the meso level. Philippe holds several important positions, including being a member of the UC Louvain board, and he's also serving as the dean of the Faculty of Bioengineering until recently, for a number of years. He's also a member of the Académie Royale de Belgique and the Academia dei Geophili. So let me welcome with you and with an applause Philippe Baret, and I'm very much looking forward to today's lecture, From Policies to Practices, an Agroecological Approach to Transition. Welcome, Philippe Baret.
Thank you, Peter. Good evening to all of you, and I'm very pleased to be here in Humboldt University. A bit impressed, I have to mention, because you will discover that I am a long-time relationship with Alexander von Humboldt, as I'm teaching ecology in my university, and that's part of the teaching. So thank you for this invitation and this opportunity to speak with you about agroecology. I know that you like to have the slides, so the slides are online on this website if you want, and if you scan the QR code, normally it should work to get the slides. I'm here in Berlin for this lecture, but also we were with Peter, a member of a EU consortium on agroecology and sustainable farming, which is called ENPhasis. The ENPhasis project will frame the current transition and try to combine system analysis, behavioral and experimental studies, and also we are very aware in this project about lock-ins. So I will speak about this concept of lock-ins, which is quite complex, in fact, but it's one of the conditions to remove these lock-ins in order to start a real transition. I will be back to that. And the interesting thing of the ENPhasis project is that we are working with 10 case studies across Europe, And so trying to root our research in a concrete example with stakeholders for these different case studies. So this is the context of my presence in Berlin, but today I like to discuss with you the concept of agroecology and the concept of transition. So we can say many things on agroecology, so I was a bit hesitant on the way I will discuss the project with you, the concept of agroecology, and my choice was to start from the question of transition, and from that discuss the agroecological option and the way this option can contribute to the transition. I have to say from the very beginning of this talk that for me, agroecology is not a solution, because I'm not very keen on this idea that I have the good solution and then everything will be sorted out. It's more complex than that. And we have to be modest, but also we have to be radical in terms of our beliefs and in terms of trying to implement a real transition. And I will start with good news. In fact, it will not be good news all along, but for the start, we can be convinced, and many scientists are convinced, that in 2050, agricultural and food system will be more resilient, healthier, and more diverse. In fact, it's due to a simple fact. The current trajectory, based on overconsumption and overproduction, both upstream and downstream, will hit two limits: a resource limit and a social limit. The resource limit is the fact that the current agricultural model is based on oil for pesticides and on gas for chemical fertilizers. And in 2050, we will not be able to rely on gas and petrol to do farming. We are sure of that. And the second idea is societal perspective. There is a growing awareness of the health and environmental impacts of agricultural and food systems. And so the way the systems are working today will be unbearable on the long time. And so disease related to imbalanced diets, the presence of chemicals in the environment are becoming more prevalent in industrialized society and are attracting a lot of conversations. And so I'm convinced that on the long term, we are sure that we will have something more, I would say more relevant, considering the 21st century. The big problem is that I cannot give you reassurances on 2030, on 2035. I don't know if we will go up to the last drop of petrol. I don't know if we will accept climate change above 2 or 3 degrees. I don't know that. I know that at one moment it will be impossible, but I don't know if we will be able to act rapidly, considering the magnitude of the change we need to make. A lot of scientists are thinking that we have to be quicker on the transition, but we have to recognize that, in fact, this radical transformation is difficult to implement, and we are more on incremental transformation that are not achieving the targets. And on this aspect, agricultural and food systems are at the heart of our lives, our daily existence, and that's what makes them interesting, but also that makes them probably a source of stagnation, and I will try to demonstrate that in my first part of the talk. And to understand that, I will start from another transition, which is the energy transition. For the energy, there is no vision, a shared vision, about the fact that on the long term we will rely on renewable energies and we will have to work on sufficiency to save a maximum of energy. There is also a consensus on the tools. We know that we need new policies, new behaviors, and new technologies. There is debate. There is debate about the pace of the transition and about the trade-offs. But I think the movement is on for energy. And despite there is different visions, everybody agreed that the transition should proceed. And one of the examples is the fact that there was decision at the European level to stop the thermic car in 2035. Subject to debate, but there is a decision and there is a conversation. It's not the case for agricultural system, and I like to think that there is a kind of agricultural exception. So I recommend you a beautiful exhibition in Gemelle Gallery on France, not on Sunday when it's free, because there is so many people that it's difficult to watch something, but it's wonderful anyway. And I put that because you know this idea of farming, agriculture, food, it's really part of our culture. I know electric cars are not part of our culture, but food, vegetables, fruit, this kind of image, this is 1630, and we are still with that kind of image in our minds. We are educated. Everybody can can sketch a farm when he is a boy or a girl. So, and that's one of the reasons for me that it's more difficult to change, because everybody has an advice, everybody has a personal relationship with food and farm system. Despite we know that there is two big issues. One is that agriculture and food systems are the key player, a key player of some of the overcame limits. For biodiversity, agricultural systems are the main culprit. For climate, it's 1/4 of the issue is coming from agriculture. For nitrogen cycle, agriculture is clearly the leader of the issue. So clearly, if you are completely, objective, then you will say, we will start by agricultural system, because they are the most problematic. But we are starting by mobility, energy, other things. Second thing is the health issue. You know that there is an obesity epidemic in America. It's coming to Europe. There is other health issue. There is health issues related to chemicals. This morning in the journal Le Monde, there was an article on the chemicals effect on people selling flowers. So it's now recognized as a work disease for some people. So it's really an issue. And to be more precise, for me, one of the problems are the narratives. You know that we are in a world of social media. We are in a world where there is narratives that are successful or unsuccessful. And for me, one of the keys that there is 3 misleading narratives in farming system. And it's important that we discuss that before discussing agroecology, because these narratives are often used to dismiss agroecology, to say that it will not be sufficient, not be useful, not be the right option. These 3 misleading narratives are the following. Farmers need to produce more to feed the world. Citizens have to support the income of farmers. And the power is in the pocket of the consumer. By the pocket, I mean the behavior. First one, farmers needs to produce more to feed the world. We have known since 1970s that this is not the case. Hunger is not a problem of production. Hunger is multifactorial, is due to crisis, to war, to different kind of crisis. It's mainly due to poverty. It was shown by Amartya Sen, who got already in 1998 the Nobel Prize of Economy. So we know that it's not in producing more that we will solve the issue of hunger. And if it's due to poverty, it's more than that, because in fact, if we produce more in Europe and we are selling cheap product on the market, we make the life of African farmers, of South American farmers more difficult, because they will not get a price for what they produce in different conditions than us. And so overproduction can be more the causes of poverty than the solution to poverty. So it's completely misleading. It was demonstrated by people working on that, but it's still a major narrative in the general conversations, this idea of food security. If we are not producing more, then we will suffer from problems, we will have hunger. And it's also a quantitative absurdity because, in fact, we produce today more than necessary, and the rate of increase of the production is quite higher than the rate of increase of the populations. So we are not into trouble from this point. I have no time to develop, but I remind you that the ability to have good food is a human right. And so there is a UN rapporteur for food security, for the right to food, and it is Olivier de Scuter, one of my colleagues in Louvain, and he published a document in 2010 to say that agroecology is certainly part of the best option to solve this solution, based on the fact that it will give empowerment to farmers, not based on the fact that it's producing more food. That's the main idea. So there is a lot of document on that. I have no time to go further, but there was also one of this series of lectures was presented by Tilman Brück on this topic. So go to the YouTube on the Cosmos lecture and you will have good information on this topic. The second narrative is that the citizens have to support the income of farmers. You know, all these farmers, they are working in very hard conditions. They are all very poor, and we have to help them. And so that was the main discourse, the main narrative in Brussels in January 2024 about the income of farmers. And so you can think, yes, really, it's our duty as citizens to give by the taxation process and the common agricultural policy to transfer some money to the farmers. The problem is that when you analyze the situation, you see that, yes, it's true. There is less and less farmer in the system for the moment, and the share of agriculture in the global income of the society is decreasing. That's true. That's true. But in fact, look on the right, what is happening in the distribution of the common agricultural policy subsidies is a big inequalities. In one sentence, 20% of the beneficiaries are receiving 80% of the money. So if there is poor farmers, it's not due to the fact that the total amount given by the citizens is insufficient. The problem is the distribution of this amount. And the fact that this amount is going to big farmers, and the smallest farmers have problems to survive. And the second consequence, because there is a lot of discourse about the decline of farmers, there is less and less farmers, so it will be a problem. It will be a problem if there is less agricultural land. But in fact, the agricultural land is stable. The production is increasing. And so what's happening? What's happening? It's very simple. The big farmers with the big subsidies, they are buying the land of the poor farmers. And so we have in the process of increasing the size of the farms, increasing the benefits of the farmers having big farms. And so it's not a problem that the citizen can solve by giving more money. It's a citizen that should be solved within the farming system, within the EU policies. And so that's a misleading narrative again. The third narrative is that to help the farmer, we need to change our behavior as consumer. And again, I'm sorry about that. I'd like to demonstrate that this narrative is wrong. We can have long lectures about the value chain, but I really like this figure. It's a bit old, it's 2014, but it's still, the figures are more or less correct. So it's the Dutch food chain. On one side, you have the number of farmers, 65,000. On the other side, you have the number of consumers, 7 million. And in between, you have a value chain with a diversity of actors. But when you see is that at the middle of the system, you have 5 purchasing companies in the Netherlands. If you look at this picture, do you think that the consumers has a power in this system? Who has the power in this system? The 5 purchasing companies. So if we want to change the thing, and in order to give better conditions to the farmers and to the consumers, perhaps we have to speak about these guys. But I can testify that they were not present in Brussels around any table. There is a strategic dialogue just finished in Brussels. They were not present as well. So that's really the invisible part of the value chain, which is the most powerful. And so this narrative, again, is not correct. And moreover, the behavior of the consumer. Do you think that you are free when you are going to a shop? Do you think that you are free when you are deciding to buy hamburger, or I'm just close to Frittenwerk, so if you have some French fries, I'm not so sure. And it was studied by colleagues. It's called now food environments. And so the way we behave, our relation to food is mediated by food quality and safety, by advertising, by economic access, by physical access. And if you walk in Berlin, you will see that the physical access to good food, to healthy food, is not so good. I traveled from Frankfurt to Berlin on Sunday. I took some pictures to prepare these lectures. That's the classic pictures you can see, classic image you can see in any train station in Germany, I think. And it's testifying that the idea that the freedom of choice of the consumer is kind of an illusion. But it's a very powerful narrative when you see the conversation on farm and food systems. Last thing, but very important for me before speaking about agroecology, there is a study achieved by my colleagues of Le Basique in France, which is a small cooperative producing very interesting studies. They look at the cost of the food system for the French state. There is a lot of publication about the cost of food. There is a big report by the FAO that was published 1 year ago. But I like this approach because instead of estimating the potential cost of the food, they calculate the real cost. What is the real cost? It's the cost for the French government, for the French budget of the way we consume food. So it's the cost for the French budget of the disease related to food, of environmental issues related to food, and on social issues related to farm and food systems. So it's real money. They were just looking at that. And the cost for the French government is close to 20 billion euros, which is huge. And more than 11 billion euros are related to health issues. Is it because health issues are more important than environmental issues? No, because it's because health issues you have to deal with. Environmental issues, you can pretend that you have no money to deal with them. So probably the money the budget should allocate to environmental issues should be far higher than the 3 billion they allocate for the moment. But 19 billion, it's huge. And if you look in the same study, about the marketing expenses of the food sectors, it's 5.5 billion. So do you believe that they spend 5.5 billion to favor the freedom of the consumers? They are very stupid then. But you imagine that a system spending 5.5 billion to convince you to buy and consume more unhealthy food cost to the society 11 billion in diseases. That's very astonishing. It's a beginning. This study about the true cost of food are beginning. There is a project in Switzerland. I'm sure there will be some project in Germany. It will become a bigger issue. And I like this approach working on budget because then it can trigger directly a discussion with the governments. So, and I finish with this long introduction, but important for me, because otherwise we don't understand why the transition is not present for the moment. You see that there is common aspect in these misleading narratives. The first one is the focus on productivity, on yield. Usually when you are speaking with a farmer, there is only one indicator, is yield. More important than income, yield. The second is the invisibility of power relationship. The farm and food system are full of power relationship, full of inequalities, but there is no conversation on that. And the third, and that's very important as a scientist, is that there is no causality analysis. We are not looking at the causal loop, why there is this health issues. Is it related to food or not? This kind of study are really missing. This kind of conversation with the policymaker is really missing for the moment. Okay, but you are not coming here for having a conversation of the farm and food system. You are here for the agroecological proposition, so we will go to the agroecological proposition, I promise. So now I will focus. So, agroecological agenda is complicated because it's polysemic. There is different vision of agroecology. It's not a very established science. If we are discussing about physics or ecology or chemistry, it's sometimes more than 2,000 years old, sometimes at least 200 years old. Ecology is something like 50 years old. So it's a recent science, still in its infancy. So I will just choose 3 spots, but it will be a chronological approach. Agroecology was starting as practices, then as a system approach, and finally as a policy option. First, agroecology as practices. There is discussion, but we can say that one of the origins of agroecology is the work of Miguel Altieri in 1987. So Miguel is a Latin American professor in Berkeley, in California, and he was working with farmers. He's an entomologist by training. And at this moment, 1987, it was really the success of the Green Revolution. Just behind the wall here, there is a grandfather of the Green Revolution, Fritz Haber. He was discovering the way to do chemical nitrogen, chemical fertilizers, and it was a big success. The 20th century is the success of a technological revolution called the Green Revolution, using pesticides, improved seeds, and chemical fertilizers. We manage, as a society, to increase by 3 the global production on Earth. So that's amazing. That's really fascinating. Some people are still fascinated. Some are not. Some are not because some said, okay, but there is probably other options that are more nature-based. And second, this is really good from the production side, but from the environmental side and from the health side, it's not a big success. But we discovered the problems at the end of the 20th century, celebrating the success 20 years before. So that was the big issue. And it's the reason why I'm a bit uneasy when people are saying, this guy from the Green Revolution, they were stupid. They were not stupid. They were not anticipating the issues. And so now we know the issues, but the people thinking that we should go on with the Green Revolution, they are stupid, because now we know the issues, so we cannot accept that we are still on this pathway. And the title of the book is very important. Miguel Altieri said, Agroecology, the scientific basis of alternative agriculture. Alternative to what? Alternative to a chemical-based agriculture like the Green Revolution. And so what Miguel was proposing is to use different principles to orient the production, recycling mainly of fertilizer, build on biodiversity, improve animal health, no use of external input, attention to the soil health, living soil, and in fact, to sum up, try to build on all the potential synergy between human production and natural process, what we call now ecological services. So it was really an alternative in the sense that I will not focus on practices. There is plenty of practices filling this agenda. But the idea of Miguel was, in fact, to have a new mindset to organize your production. That's the idea. And that's something important to understand. Agroecology, despite the title of this lecture, it was just to make you coming here, but it was a lie, in fact. There is no agroecological practices. It doesn't exist. It doesn't exist. There is agroecological principles. And these principles, they can be declined in practices. But the motto of agroecology is that the scientists are more or less in charge of the principles, discussing that with the stakeholders. And the implementation of the principle, it is the job of the farmers. It is the job of the people. We have not to be prescriptive in terms of practices. But we can say, if you follow these principles, you will probably be successful in the way you organize your system. And some of these principles, they were decided with the farmers, so it's not just a scientist's game. Okay? So agroecology are principles. And so there is 13 principles, and we will discover them together. Here are the 6 first. And the 6 first are at the farm level. That's the first version of agroecology. It's very different from the other paradigm, because here we are entering a question of innovation paradigm. So innovation, what do I mean by innovation paradigm? In fact, the idea of innovation paradigm is that when you have a problem, you are always looking for the solution on the same shelf. People having some health problem, they are going to have antibiotics, and others, they are going to a Chinese doctor, and others, they are using plants. And normally, there is different paradigms to solve your problem. One of the paradigms of the Green Revolution is well illustrated by this. And it's not a very old image. It's 4 years ago in all the journal for farmers in Belgium. And the purpose was to sell an herbicide. And you see the image. For me, it was really a shock when I've seen this image. You imagine what we see with this image. So the nature is dangerous. You've seen the dam, concrete dam, and then you see the beautiful combine there with a monocropping. Clearly a monocropping, it should be a monocropping. And so the title is the power of herbicides. That's what we call the paradigm of mastering the nature. And that's clearly the agenda of the 20th century. The paradigm of agroecology is working with nature, trying to find synergy. And that's the most important thing to keep in mind, is that there is a clear opposition between these two paradigms. There is a clear opposition. I'm not keen on opposition. I will develop that later. But on this, I'm very keen, because I cannot accept. Go to a fair for farmers where they are selling tractors. You have all the narrative is around power. It's also very man-related. It's really this kind of values of virility and things like that are from the 20th century. Okay. So an example of the opposite is organic farming. Organic farming, we have no time to discuss. Perhaps if you have questions, we can go further. But organic farming is an example on a shared paradigm with agroecology, okay, based on the use of nature. Second dimension of agroecology, and my favorite, in fact, is the system approach. So we cannot escape here in Humboldt to refer to the father of the system approach, which are Alexander von Humboldt, and this famous image. Probably most of you know this image, but otherwise it's important to have that in mind, because it was beginning of the 18th century. No, it was later. So, but the idea of Humboldt was that there is a relationship between the habitat and the plant you find. And it was the first time somebody was thinking botany in a system-minded approach. So he tried to understand the system made by the plants and the habitat. And he made this picture showing that the different plants are at different altitude in the Latin America transect, okay? And later, it was put into a concept of ecosystem, which is one of the key concepts for me of humanity. We spoke a lot about volatility and things and that, but ecosystem is really a change maker in terms of system, of a concept. And it's a guy called Tansley, Arthur Tansley, and it was not easy, also a botanist. And he said, what is an ecosystem? An ecosystem is the whole systems, including not only the organism complex, but also the whole complex of physical factors, forming what we call the environment of the biome, the habitat factor in the widest sense. What is important here is the word complex. By complex, what Arthur Tansley, and it was already in Alexander von Humboldt's picture, its meaning is the interrelation, the relationship between the elements of the physical world and the living world. That's a key element of agroecology. It's this system thinking. The interesting thing in agroecology is that we extended this system thinking to the food system. Green Revolution was improving the plants. It's just by working on the object plant that they managed to triple the yield at the world level. Here, what we are looking at is improving the food system. So we have first to define this food system. This food system is made of a value chain between producer and consumers, but also flows of money, flows of energy, flows of water, and other entity. I discussed already the social-cultural dimension of consumption. There is also governance issue. There is also the link to technology. There is also issues like climate change of biodiversity loss. So the object of agroecology is not the plant, it's not the animals, it's not the farm. At the beginning, it was the farm with Miguel Altieri, but no, and it was the work of Stefan Glissman, it's the food system. And so this idea of working on the food system will imply a series of new principles. Connectivity, attention to the connectivity, co-creation of knowledge. Knowledge is very important in this system. The social values and the specific diets, the economic diversification, fairness and participation. So all these principles are description of the way an agroecological food system should work. We are far from that, and we will discuss that later, but that's the idea. The third level is the policy option. I insist on this. It's an option. So for me, what we need today in facing the transition, facing the challenges I explained at the beginning, is not to say that we have the solution, that we are the best, but we have to open the conversation to different options. And agroecology is one option for the future of food and of farm and food systems. It was already, I mentioned that before, in the Special Rapporteur report in 2010. The strategic dialogue on the future of EU agriculture now in 2024 is mentioning that in many pages that EU has to support agroecology and organic farming. It's one of the models which is presented as the best option for EU farming system. And for me, it's a kind of revolution because 10 years ago, when Olivier was publishing this UN, it was more wishful thinking. And to see that now in an EU report is really something interesting. And I think it's now legitimate as a policy option. There is still competition between the different policy options. I'm not naive. Okay. So, to sum up, agroecological principles, there are 13. Some of them, they are at the farm level, at the bottom. Some of them, they are at the food system level. Local food systems, but also the global food system. I have no time to go further, but if you are interested and you want really, in a nutshell, to have a full understanding of agroecology, there is a report by the high-level panel of experts, which is really the best, for me, the best document for the moment to understand agroecology. It's accessible. It's 2019, so it's not outdated. And clearly, it's really a must if you want to go further. And there is a full description of all the principles and all the consequences. But to be more concrete, I like to develop one of the challenges we are facing today to show you what the agroecology can bring to the way we think about the future of system. And this is a work made by Océane Duloins. It was recently published in Nature Food, and we were working on the protein transition. You know, the concept of protein transition is the fact that considering the impacts of the livestock system, we should shift our consumption of protein from 60 animal-based, 40 plant-based, to 40 animal-based and 60 plant-based. And so you can find everywhere advertisement for plant-based product, veggie product, all this story. And this is the objective. And the situation today is the following. Per kilogram of body weight and per day, we are eating 83, we should eat 83 grams of proteins. In practice, we are eating 125. This 125 is made of 0.75 of animal-based and 0.5 of plant-based. So clearly, there is an imbalance, and we are eating too much animal-based proteins. So we overconsume protein. That is not in the narrative. The narrative is you have to eat more plant-based protein. The narrative is not you have to consume less proteins. Okay, let's look at what we can do. Imagine we decrease the consumption of animal-based protein by 2, and we just keep the same level of plant-based protein, we just achieve the objective. So we don't need to produce new solutions. We don't need new alternatives. And studying this topic, we discovered that, in fact, the increase of the market of the plant-based protein is not corresponding to a decrease of the market of animal-based protein, because there is a lot of advertisement, there is a lot of incentives to sell animal-based protein. So we have, in a market-driven world, where we will consume more plant-based protein and still consume the same amount of animal-based protein. And so we will reach the equilibrium, but by an overconsumption in the system, which is very bad in terms of impacts. So the narrative telling if you eat plant-based proteins, you are good for the planet is completely wrong. What you have to do to be good for the planet is decrease your consumption of animal-based protein and not to increase your consumption of plant-based protein. I know that individually it's different publics, but if you look globally at the EU level, the policies should be not to increase the plant-based protein market, because it will lead to an overconsumption with impacts on the environmental issues. So the problem is that then we have to deconsume. And you see that the problem, and we are very proud of this paper, but in some respect it's a stupid paper because the argument is so simplistic. You know? So how can you, with this simplistic argument, be in Nature Food, which is one of the best journals? That's completely crazy, no? I think so. But why? Because in fact, all the literature on protein transition is either on consumption or on production. So they are not in a food system approach. Either you are specialist of consumer behavior, of development of plant-based alternatives, or you are specialist of livestock, impact of livestock and things like that, but you are not trying to connect both hands of the system. So that's the reason why this paper is really, for me, an agroecological paper, because it's starting from a system vision, okay? And the Europe is really in a dilemma, because in fact, we are over-consuming animal proteins, and also we are overproducing animal proteins. And in fact, 21% of the world exports of animal products are coming from Europe. So the solution to decrease our impact on the planet is to stop exportations of animal products. It's not to push European citizens to eat more plant-based proteins. And to produce this 21% of world export, we import 20 million tons of soybean each year. Okay? So you see the craziness. It looks very crazy, but this conversation has not started so far. And if you look at the strategic dialogue I mentioned, and you do a word research, the word exportation is not in any of the 120 pages, despite it is a driver of European policy today. So for me, that's something we have really to think about. I have no solution, but for me, this question of post-growth model of farm and food system is really one of the key issues of our century. So consumption and production should be co-regulated consistently. And one of the big issues, but Peter is better than I on this topic because I am not a specialist of policies, but one of the issues I notice in the way the policies are organized is that the common agricultural policy is mainly on the production side, and consumer policies are mainly at the national side with completely different agendas. So clearly, there is here a big issue. Okay, so we know what are the challenges, we know what is agroecology, and so to finish, I like to propose you 4 injunctions. I'm not in favor of injunction, but for the sake of simplicity, I choose to do that. So first, to remind you that agroecology is different. Agroecology is a system approach, and agroecology is a policy option. So agroecology is the first thing I suggest is to be different. So for me, it's not the problem of solution-driven approach is that it doesn't change the mindset, it doesn't change the way we organize our societies. And so for me, the first things that we can do with agroecology is to help the society thinking differently. And so for me, the first injunction is be different. So we need a new mindset on farm and food system. We need a new vision of sustainability. Agroecology is in favor of the strong sustainability model. What is the strong sustainability model? It's a hierarchy between environmental issue, social issue, and economic issues. And agroecology should be the paradigm of innovation of the 21st century. So not this herbicide-based innovation mastering nature, but other paradigm of innovation. So the purpose of agroecology is transformative change at the system level. Second, we have to be consistent. For the moment, farm and food systems actors are entangled in a messy network of justification. Most of the conversation on farm and food systems are justification of status quo. That's most of the conversation for the moment. And the narratives are not respectful of the realities. So I don't like the idea of fact-based or science-based. For me, we have to be respectful of realities. So it's more complex than just to be fact-based. But it has to be some link with the reality of farmers, the reality of consumers, the reality of policymakers and things like that. And I like this sentence. I wrote this sentence and then I like it. So the priority is not to substitute meat burger with veggie burger, But the priority is to have a vision for the future of farm and food sectors within the limits of the planet and in line with our global health. That's the priority. And then probably we have to change our behavior. But we have not to escape first the vision before changing our behaviors. We need a societal debate, target, and monitoring. And we have to be cautious because there is new concept like regenerative agriculture, another Ersatz, I like this German word. They are not per se in line with agroecology principles. So agroecology is a public good. Agroecology is made by scientists, is made by farmers, is made by members of the society. Regenerative agriculture is a private good. We have to be cautious about that. Sometimes it's converging, sometimes it's not. But it's in competition for the moment, and regenerative agriculture has a lot of money and is very successful in the conversation now. But there is no scientific paper, there is no principles, and there is no certifications and regulations. So it's quite dangerous for me. So we have to keep in mind that farm and food systems are central in agricultural policies, but also in environmental, social, and health policy. So in one word, agriculture is no more the problem of farmer. Agriculture is no more the problem of Minister of Agriculture. Agriculture is a social, health, environmental, and societal issue. And we have to have that in mind. And third point, we have to be ambitious. The share of agroecology in farm and food system is very limited today. If you think in terms of organic farming, we are, according to the country, from 3% in Flanders to 20% in Austria. It's not enough, that's clear. There were ambitious targets fixed for the farm-to-fork strategy, but the farm-to-fork strategy was dying in front of us in Brussels in January 2024. I don't know if we will be able to resuscitate this strategy, but clearly, one of the interests of this strategy was the targets. For me, we have not to be shy of targets, because otherwise, it's just a conversation on the telly. So we need targets, and we need monitoring. One of the issues of the non-transition of the farm and food system is that we have no monitoring. The success of climate change is the fact that we can measure the emissions. But the problem is in agriculture is that what we should measure is biodiversity loss, health issues, causations are difficult to determine. There is a diversity of farm and food systems. So it's complicated, but it's not the reason why we are not monitoring the farming systems. So we are monitoring the cars for the moment. We are not monitoring the farms. What's that? Third, and it's a bit contradictory with what I said before, we have to be inclusive. I think there will be no gain to oppose agroecology and another model, because then we are losing a lot of energy in this fight. And so, for the moment, the conversation on farm and food system is highly confrontational. The meat debate, the genetically modified or new breeding technology debate, the fact that the ecological targets are constrained for our welfare, and things like that. And if we apply the principles of agroecology, they are participation, fairness, co-creation of knowledge. They should be applied to the whole farm and food system, not only to the friends of agroecology. It should be principles. We should impose this principle to everybody. So we should also discuss with the people from the genetically modified paradigm to at least to open a conversation. And the game of my solution is better than yours is useless, especially for emerging actors. Because we are coming from the third division, and we are not on the first league. And so do you expect that we will be better than the best teams of the first league? No. So it's better to have a more progressive conversation, a more inclusive conversation. It doesn't mean that we have not to be radical on the long term. I'm not compromising on the final target. Clearly, I'm not compromising. On 2050, I'm clear. But we have to discuss the pathway and the share of each of us in the system. And we have to prove that our share, our part, will be a positive contribution on the pathway. Because otherwise, I think we will get stuck in the situation today. The priority for me is still to build a legitimacy to agroecology in the diversity of options. And I thank you for coming this evening, because that's clearly the kind of thing I like to do, because it's building legitimacy. That's important. We have, without being legitimate, we cannot start the trip. So sometimes we are too quick. We want to be implied, we want to propose solutions, we want to change everything, and we are not yet legitimate. So we are in the process now. I hope we will finish soon, but we are in this process for the moment. I think, and this is important, to make most of our energy on building capacities, on being part of alliances with other actors, and to convince people that our mindset could be helpful for the society. So I will finish with this positive idea to say that agroecology is something different, is something radical, but it should enter alliances. It should be part of the big conversation of the society, but it should also change the rules of this conversation. That is very important, otherwise we will never achieve the necessary transition of farm and food system, and this is one of the key elements of our welfare and of the future of our society. I thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Philippe Baret, for this fascinating, very concise talk. And I think it was really in the spirit of the Cosmos lectures, a very complex topic, I think, in very digestible, also very colorful terms. So we have about half an hour time for questions and comments from the audience. And we have two microphones running around. The first one should go to the lady here in the front with the glasses. And if you please briefly introduce yourself by saying your name and if you are from some institution that you want to link to.
Hello, my name is Lea. I'm actually from the Technical University of Berlin, studying urban planning. So somehow I came to the food and environmental topic. Thank you very much for your very inspiring talk. And now I have to ask a very boring question, actually, because it's about terms. Since when I got first into contact with ecological forms of agriculture, supplying food and stuff, I was very confused by the terms. And now you also stepped away from regenerative agriculture. And the very boring part is now, why is that? And when do you use the term regenerative agriculture, and when wouldn't you?
So first I confirm that because it was I think 5 years ago, 6 years ago, with MSc students, we were looking for the scientific basis of regenerative agriculture, and we found nothing, in fact. We found nothing. There is 5 routes to regenerative agriculture, most of them in the States, in fact. That's interesting, not in Europe. And some of them are based on organic agriculture. But the big change was, I think, 2019, I think, when Danone and General Mills in the States, Danone in Europe, were embarking this concept in their communication. So then there was a big change because they chose to use this concept of regenerative agriculture as a motto instead of speaking about organic or about agroecological. For example, Carrefour was using a lot agroecological. For the COP21, it was a lot of advertisement of agroecological. And then they shift to this. And I discussed with some of these people from the big company, and I said, why? And they said there is 2 reasons. One reason is that this idea of regenerative is really appealing because we destroy the planet and now we will regenerate the planet. So that's appealing for the conversation, clearly. And in terms of objective, it's a beautiful objective. And the second, that's less interesting probably, is that it's a fuzzy term. And so we can put many things in it. And for them to put many things in it is good because everything is okay. So you can put conservation agriculture, but conservation agriculture is based on glyphosate, on an herbicide. So you are putting something based on an herbicide as a regenerative project? A bit strange, no? But we can also put organic farming. We can put other things. So for me, the danger is that this term is attracting a lot of consumers, not knowing what they are buying because there is no definition. And the problem is that it's capturing consumers coming from the organic sector and not consumers coming from the conventional sector. So the problem is that if this term is taking people from McDonald's to bring them towards an organic but the problem is McDonald's is doing regenerative agriculture in France. They pretend that the burgers are regenerative. And because, and that's the last element that are really disturbing, is cherry picking. So what is important in agroecology, I hope I demonstrate that, is that we have to target the 13 principles together. And we have not to change only the farm or part of the farm and not the food systems. The regenerative agriculture is cherry picking. Oh, my burger is made from fresh meat, so it is regenerative. Okay, so except that eating burger is not really a nice thing, and you see? So that's really the problem. I have difficulties to do more on that, but it shows something that, and some people are working on that, and Peter is among these people, the power of narrative is more and more important than before in the society. So we have to be very cautious on that, and we have to be very critical and to interrogate people when you say regenerative agriculture, why? And we have not to be satisfied by a quick answer, very simplistic. So that's for me the main lesson of the success of this concept.
Oh, great. Thank you very much for elaborating that. We've got more questions. So
yeah, sure. And I will be shorter, sorry.
Because otherwise we cannot back and forth. So the next was the gentleman here on that side.
Thank you very much. My name is Tony Clem. I'm a postdoc at the Leibniz Center for Agricultural Landscape Research, and I see a few of my colleagues in the room. So I'm a bit nervous to ask this, and it might be a little ignorant of some of the factors. You said earlier, you talked earlier about deconsumption and deproduction, and I'm very much on board with this. I think we're all eating too much and too much of the wrong kind of food. But the thing that always strikes me is when we eat less and produce less, farmers will earn less. And unless we increase prices, which kind of contradicts social sustainability, how do you counter that? How do you make farmers produce less, but make sure that they still earn enough money so that they're not, so that they're first on board with this and don't require more subsidies just to make a living?
Okay, so you are right in the present conditions, but the present conditions are a kind of strange situation. In fact, the Common Agricultural Policy was designed to produce more food because we had hunger crisis in Europe and to produce cheap food. So that was the project. And so the subsidies, they were used to do that, to help the farmers to produce more and to keep the food cheap for the consumer. And it was working up to the 1975, 1980. But then we enter a new world where this overproduction was no more used to give cheap food to the consumer, but also to export because we were overproducing. And I don't understand why we use subsidies to export cheap food across the world, destroying the planet and the Europe ecosystem. So that's the first element of the conversation. The second, to be more precise and for the future. So what I want to say is that we are in a given frame, and to answer your question, we have to change the frame. In the frame we have today, you are right. But for me, this frame is outdated and has no future. And why? Because in fact, the problem is not that the food is too expensive when it is relevant. The problem is that the food is too cheap when it is irrelevant. So we are paying the food at least 4 times. We are paying the food when we buy the food. We are paying the food when we buy our tax. We are paying the food when we go to the hospital. And we are paying the food when we buy our water. Okay? So if you add all this cost, and that's the project of my French colleagues, the Swiss colleagues, and things like that, then you can find, if you change the system, you can save 11 billions in the French system. And you can use this 11 billions to have a more relevant system. And something important about the social issue is that the problem of the social issue is not the problem of the price of food. The problem of the social issue is a social issue. It's a problem of poverty. If people have not enough money to buy proper food, it's a social policy that is not working. I don't understand why farmers' agricultural system should compensate for a social policy. So for me, the price of food should be the real price of food, giving an income to the farmers, respectful of the environment. It will not increase the price of food by 3 or 4 times. Perhaps it will double. But clearly, meat at €5 the kilogram is impossible in a normal system. But if you go to the Lidl or Aldi, you will find it. I can give you some address, okay, or €2. So that's not possible. So the problem is not the cheap price of food. The problem is why is it so cheap?
Yeah. So there are a number of studies in that direction. For those who are interested, I would also like to point to the study on the economics of food system transitions, where also Hermann Lotze-Kampen, who was one of the previous Cosmos lecture presenters, was also involved. And they show that the external costs of the food system are much higher than actually the added value in the system, which is quite astonishing. So we have many more hands up. So the first one was here, Annette Pior. Mm-hmm.
Yes, my name is Annette Pior. I'm also from the Leibniz Center of Agricultural Landscape Research in Müncheberg. I liked your lecture a lot, and I also liked that you started really with the narratives and the framing. And I think now, meanwhile, all of us are on your side that the narrative "we need to feed the world" is outdated. And you showed us the system approach of agroecology. And I'm now wondering a little bit where you now see at this point the main levers. So for the CAP, so we know the first pillar means the basic payments to the farms is really something what is hindering transformation since long, but there are the lobbyists who still keep it. We have the second pillar, but it's not enough. It managed to bring organic farming to that point, but not more. And now taking your system approach, do you think it would be something like an organic farming 2.0, like bringing organic farming into a region approach or into a value chain approach? Or would it be something that, basically we have to deal with this power of these few institutions or these few mega companies who deal with the market? Or do you think that we basically have to go beyond the CAP to think that we need something completely radically different, which has this cross-sectoral approach, which includes health, which includes, so that we say maybe even the CAP is outdated for such a system, and agriculture cannot be seen anymore as a single sector which needs support, but we need maybe to support regions or whatever. So what is basically behind your policy implications?
The question is for Peter then. No,
No,
I
but
think
also
you
for
give a part of the answer. For me, the urgency is to organize ourselves. To organize ourselves as a scientist, are people convinced of the need of a change. And so to have a strategy. So for the moment, we are missing a strategy to push forward the transition for me. We have ideas, we are fighting, we are making conferences and things like that, but we have not a common strategy. For example, in terms of innovation, most of the innovations proposed by colleagues are not embedded in a policy pathway. That's, for me, the key point is to organize ourselves, because you underline very comprehensively the challenges. The second is to think production and consumption together, which is not the case, and it's not the way science is organized. It's not the way advocacy is organized as well. You have Greenpeace on one side, you have the consumers on the other. So, and sometimes it's very naive also, the narrative of this type of team. The third element for me, it's two teams. One team on the long term and one team on the short term. And what we need is some people investing, and it's what we do in my small team. We are investing for 2030, 2050. So all our studies are on foresight and this scale. But we have also contact with people of the Commission, with people like Peter, with partners of networks that are more on policy instruments on the short terms. And I think we have to communicate between the two teams, but to be focused on the scale we choose. That's important. Last thing is we have not to forget the meso level. There's no time to speak about that. But we are speaking a lot about the micro level, so the consumers, the farmers, the individuals. We are speaking a lot about the global policies, the CAP, the COP, the climate issues. But there is a lot of actors at the meso level that are very aware of the issues, but they are a bit alone. People in charge of regulations in the lander, people advising the farmers, people in the intermediate levels in the big corporate companies. They like to have more sense in their work, but they have no connections with other people. And they are key for me for being part of the team. It's like in football. If the back player and the front player are not connected by the medium players, it will not work. And for the moment, we try to play between back players and front players, but not the medium. So that's something I think we can do.
Okay, we try to bring more players into the game. First, the lady here in the second row.
First of all, thank you very much for your lecture. My name is Friederike Kaiser, and I work for a parliamentarian in the domain of development cooperation, and that's also where my question is going to go. So within German development cooperation, particularly in the sector of nutrition and food security, there is right now the discussion of which kinds of projects to support. Of course, it's like also negotiation with the partner country. So there is the part of some groups say, okay, we need also to push agroecological practices in other countries. And the other side says, okay, well, if you look at certain countries, they do struggle with providing enough food for their population. And right now, I mean, let's take, for example, Malawi. The agriculture there is based a lot on fertilizer. So if you would cut the fertilizer right away, there would be even a bigger problem of providing enough food. And I would just be interested on your take on that discussion, or whether you have one, because right now it's like more domestic orientation in that lecture we just had. But yeah, that would be very interesting for me to hear. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for the question, because I was planning to speak a bit about that and I forgot. I'm a tropical engineer by training, and I work for 3 years in Africa, so I'm very concerned by these issues. And I'm still working with some countries like Burkina Faso and Senegal. It's a complicated question, but I have two elements. One is that considering the challenges in terms of transition, we have to clarify our position in Europe because we are still seen as a kind of model. And so it's normal that people in Africa are asking for fertilizer and GM technologies if we are thinking that's a solution for Europe. And so we have to clarify a better our position. That's one thing. The second thing is that agroecology is not a set of practices. So when it is used in the South, it's often used as practices. And there is a labeling of some practices, compost, agroforestry, and things like that, and we say it's agroecology. Perhaps it is, but my understanding is that it's not the way we should do agroecology. And the big problem is that big institutions like CIRAT in France, I'm in the scientific board, and other big institutions working in the South, they bought the old version of agroecology, this one of the initial idea of Altieri. And for me, they have to take on board the new version, food system. And so my main answer is the last one, is that we have to help these people to define their food systems for the future. So there is an immediate need for some techniques, for some technicalities, but the main issue is what is the project of this country? What is the long-term project? Is it, we can discuss the fertilizers, but what is the project with fertilizers? Is it just a temporary solutions before getting to another system? Or is it building a new dependency on the long term? That's a political issue. And are we relying on the exportation for the long term or not? We did the foresight study for Burkina Faso. Clearly, importation are required. You are in the middle of Sahel. You cannot feed your whole population with what you can produce. That's stupid. Food security is impossible without importation. But this importation should be within a food sovereignty cap, and decide by the government, control, not harming the local farmers and things like that. So for me, instead of accumulating small initiative, we need to accompany, to be partner of these countries for programming. And it was the case a long time ago. There was this World Bank policies. They were very liberal and probably creating more issues than solutions. But we need the same kind of partnership based on new rules and new projects. And we will learn from them because I think it is complex. So for me, the more we are in the conversation, the more we will be collectively intelligent.
I think it's worthwhile mentioning that agroecology has also been very important in the context of the Via Campesina small peasant movement,
yes.
Who have articulated that also partly in opposition to the kind of green revolution model of cooperation. But that's then more talking about agroecology as a social movement as well.
Yes, and it was what normally there was a slide, but I was too quick. It was what I call the policy option. So the policy option is coming from the Niele declaration in 2015, I think, or something like that. So clearly, yes, the South is leading the way as agroecology as a policy option, clearly.
Okay, the next here was Gudrun Brockmann, here in the second row. And then with a view to time, I would like to ask for relatively short statements and questions and relatively short responses. Gudrun.
Okay, thank you very much for the talk, for the very interesting talk. So I am an animal breeder here from Humboldt University, and so my questions come from this side. You talked about the narratives for the transition of our food production systems, and the animals play an important role. But you explained we don't need to eat so much protein from animals, and the prices could be higher and so on. How do you target the many little challenges which are accompanying these narratives? For example, in France or Spain, the prices for meat are twice as high as here, but I don't see the nature is better, for example, or the health of individuals is better. So, or you also said in the longer term, we will have the bigger companies. But with the bigger companies, very likely the diversity of plants and animals goes down. So we have to target this too. So how do you deal all these little questions in your report?
It will be a short answer. We have to stop to think that there is one agriculture. And so the problem today, and I was fighting with my INRAE colleagues this morning by Twitter, is that they are fighting for sustainable animal livestock production systems, but they are doing such a narrative that this narrative will support also the industrial livestock system. So we have to say, we are together with the people of the livestock, but not with all the people of the livestock sector. But for the moment, it's very difficult. Livestock is fighting for its survival, and in this fight, everybody is on board. And after the demonstration in Brussels, I said, I'm not with the farmers. And I had a problem with that. I said, I'm with some farmers, but I'm not with the farmers. Because the problem now is that the citizens, they think that they have to support the farmers, but the farmers, some of them, we have not to support them. So for livestock system is the same. For the moment, in the conversation of the livestock system, the narrative of the people supporting the livestock system is often far too general and not saying we are against, as livestock specialists, we are against the industrial system. It's not sustainable. And we want this system to disappear, to build on the multifunctionality of livestock. For me, the key of livestock is the multifunctionality. But the chicken in the Netherlands, the pig in Flanders, and in Denmark, they are not multifunctional. They are just proteins fed with soybean proteins. They have no functions except making money. So for me, we have the livestock people should be clear within their team to say, I'm no more speaking with these guys. I'm a bit radical on that, but I am an animal geneticist for my PhD. And I think there is a problem for the moment with the livestock sector in general, and mainly with the scientists. There was a declaration in Dublin. It's really stupid, this declaration, because it's saving also the Dutch farmer exporting pigs in China, which is nonsense for me, nonsense.
Yeah, so can we say that the currently dominant policy narrative is any farmer is deserving support?
Yes.
And your response would be, well, only under certain qualifications.
Yes.
Okay, good. So we have at least 3 more people who had up their hands on the very left. No longer? Yeah, there it is.
Yes, hi, Roberta Centonce. Very glad to see some of us again. Just a comment. I wanted to provoke your answer, but there was Annette Pior already provoking you to talk about the meso level, because I think you're working a lot on this level of planning, and it's something I was also reflecting on. So I will just share a comment and then drop a question. My comment is about the legal systems at this meso level. So somehow the national states in Europe delegates the policy related to agriculture to the European Union. And this created somehow a void in the legal system and also in the planning. It's like, okay, we will describe our ecosystems, our agroecological systems in order to get funded. But it's not enough. It's not the way of knowing exactly what's going on and also giving a perspective, giving a direction. So this is somehow lacking. And I think the gentle nudge of looking at the territories in terms of agroecological systems would help. And I know you're already contributing to that, so thank you. My question for me and for the audience is, large farms can be agroecological?
Yes, I think large, yes. Oh, yes, very nice question, Roberta. For me, two answers. Some large farms can be agroecological at the condition that the principles of agroecology are part of the project. And for me, something we should invest a lot in research is what is called middle agriculture. I discovered the concept 1 year ago, so I'm not making some fuss on that because I'm a bit sorry that discovering this concept 1 year ago. What is middle agriculture? It is agriculture with a given size, but applying the principle of small agriculture. I give you an example. One of my former students is now producing organic vegetables. He started with 1 hectare. He is now 32 hectares, producing 100 different varieties of vegetable and selling this on short supply chain in Brussels, because he's very good in marketing. And he managed to find a right place to sell his vegetable. In terms of environmental issue, it's perfect. In terms of employment, he's employing a total of 100 people across all year with normal contract, with social relevant contract. And he mentioned that 32 hectares is stealing, in fact, the work of 30 farmers, because the normal vegetable farm in organic is 1 hectare. And so he said, yes, I'm conscious that I'm stealing the opportunities for 30 farmers, but I'm more efficient, I'm more resilient, and I'm more relevant for the society and for the environment. And this is, for me, the definition of middle agriculture, 32 hectares. It's not 50 hectares with a single vegetable in the middle of nowhere. It's the principle of agroecology applied at a relevant scale. But then it means that we have to be honest to say that the 1 hectare model of organic vegetable production is not resilient. It's not economically resilient. I'm sorry to say that. But we made a thesis on that, and we proved that it's impossible to make a living. The guy working on this kind of models, they are unable to make a living. So either the partner is bringing the money, either they receive subsidies, either there is a trick somewhere to manage, but it's impossible. So the question of scale, it's a key question. And for me, we have to explore this idea of middle agriculture because I think it's highly motivating. Also, in link with the retail, example are people that are making a contract with the retail, saying, for example, I will ensure that I will give you each day 200 yogurt or things like that. They have the contract and then they build a stable. That's a model that is working for me because it's based on this kind of arrangement that are making possible agroecology. Because agroecology should not be for people not needing money, because then it's not an interesting option. So that's my point. But it is and that's something important to say. The big problem of agroecology today is that we are lacking research, specifically on the question of territory. There is not a lot of people working on this issue. The question of scale and the question of meso level. We know that. There is a lot of people working at the farm level, at the ecosystem level, at the organic practices. There is plenty of people. And at the policy level, there is some people. But there is big gap in our network.
I think part of the broader answer would probably also be the function and the role of the farm in the broader food system.
Sure. Yeah. I fully agree. Multifunctionality, it's the key at the territorial level, clearly, yes.
Yeah. Okay.
And
we have
just one word, because I'm coming from Belgium, a strange area like Flanders, which is the leader of intensive agriculture, some colleagues are here, they are now rethinking their agricultural system due to problem of floods, problem of water cycle, problem of nitrogen. And so they discovered that if they are only limiting the reflections on agriculture to the productivity and the income, they will be in a big trouble as a territory, as a society, And so they are really in progress now to think differently their territory and their farming systems.
Okay, we can take two more questions. First of all, the gentleman at the back. Mhm.
Hello, I'm Jochen Kartenmacher and I'm unemployed, so if anybody has a position, feel free to hire me. So I published last year a commentary in The Lancet called Universities Should Lead on the Plant-Based Transition. And ironically, I feel a little bit like, I mean, I don't want to get this to come across like negatively or confrontational, but I feel like this talk, in some parts, delegitimized my proposed solution. Yeah. So, because of course, I think the consumer actually has like a lot of power, and especially also if you think about the meso level, right? Universities have powers as consumers to change, like, yeah, basically to plant-based food rather than animal-based food. And regarding this, I also would like to say that, yeah, I think we have to acknowledge that you have some power here, and we can change this as consumers. We can choose different products, and this should not be forgotten in this conversation, because I agree, like, there's a lot of influences, and the environment like changes us in all kinds of different respects. But of course, we have some agency here too. This is like, I think this is a complex analysis of the situation. Also needs to take into account the power of the consumer. That's one response. And the other thing is, I actually, like, I'm soon going to publish, together with some co-authors, a response to the Dublin Declaration, like an analysis. And I think you will love it, and I'm going to share it with you. I see your email, and yeah, looking forward to that.
Thank you, and that's really the kind of a conversation we can continue. And you are right, and I was too short, but too quick. You are right and wrong. So right on the power of consumers, but the problem is which consumers. So well-educated and rich consumers, they have power. Not only power by buying, but also power by influencing the market, the value chain, and the politicians, and we have to use this power. The problem is that the belief in that power is so strong for the moment that we forgot that most of the consumer, they are under influence. So when you speak about agency, I fully agree with you. The problem is, for me, 80% of the population in terms of food choices, they have no agency. And that's my challenge. And so the question is, will we manage with the 20% of the 10%? And so for me, the project is to increase the agency of everybody in the system. And that's the reason why all the principles of agroecology that are at the top, they are the most important: fairness, participation, co-construction of knowledge. All this stuff are essential, and they are in line with your project. But we have to be clear that our common project is that everybody will get agency, and that's not in the conversation today, to my knowledge. That's my point for the moment.
Okay, thank you very much. And the last point was here.
Thank you for the presentation. My name is Adrien Ludo. I'm a PhD student in Peter's research unit, actually. I would have one question regarding your the way you frame the agroecology concept. So if I understood well from your presentation, you basically said that agroecological systems are food-producing systems only. So it's basically the equation agriculture equals food. And I would argue that this equation is allowed by the massive use of fossil fuels, especially oil, in the industry, in order to produce materials and molecules that we need to function as a society. The most obvious example being medicine, I guess. And so in a post-fossil society, if that's where we're heading, the non-food uses of biomass will obviously be important again. And so I wonder how you link this to the agroecology as you define it, or if you think it's relevant. Thank you.
It's fully relevant, and thank you for the question. But to my knowledge, it's a kind of forgotten issue in agroecology. So clearly, for me, the literature of the agroecology is assuming that farm equal production of food, and it's not right. So I fully agree with you, but I present what I know of agroecology. In my practice, I follow you because we are doing foresight studies. And foresight studies mean that you have to think about the way the production will develop and the way the usages will develop. To be clear, in Belgium today, in the wheat production, 9% of the wheat is used to make bread. 60% is used to feed animals. And the leftover, around 30%, is used to make biofuels. So the main function of wheat in Belgium is not food. Everybody, including the minister, when I explained that to the minister, are thinking that wheat is for food. No, never. It's the same in France. Not exactly the same figures, but it's the same in France. I don't know for Germany. So the present way the system is working is not directly feeding people. It's mainly feeding animals with a lot of loss in the system and other uses. So we have to think uses and production together. And when you do foresight, you do the job because we have no choice. At the end of the day, you need the total amount of land and the total amount of usage. If you are restricting yourself to consumers and food, the balance is not correct. So I really believe in the power of foresight studies to have a global conversation together to say, do you want this Germany in 10 years or do you want this other Germany? And for the energy sector, the conversation is on. For the farming sector, there is no conversation. And the problem of the farming sector, I'm coming back to the beginning of my talk, is that it is seen as little unit producing food and gentle people, gentle farmers, gentle consumers going to the market. Is it realistic? I don't think so. So I think we have to invest more on foresight studies to put the frame, and within this frame, find our place. We are territory, we are meso level, we are working on livestock, but we have to share a common frame before starting a conversation. Otherwise, we will be confrontational. That's something important. And last, because it's the last question, Peter. So two things. One, I encourage you to go to our website because we try to do open science, not only open paper, but also sharing all our results on our website each time to start the conversation. And second, I really believe on the layer function of science. So on this question of plant-based, if you can contact Ocean, which is my PhD student working on that, it's better than to have the conversation with me. Because I really believe that we have to create conversation at all the layers, between young people, between PhD students, between postdocs, between citizens and consumers. But you know, Belgian citizens speaking with Berlin citizens and things like that. I do believe in that, and not at the shortcuts coming by academics and policymakers and things like that. We need all these layers, especially for the meso-level people. They are often lost alone in their regions, and there is something occurring in another regions, but there is a language barriers, there is the distance and things like that, but it's not acceptable in 2024. We have teams. So thank you for... So you are finishing. So I say thank you already, and Peter will finish.
That's good, yeah. Yeah, just a final remark. Because I think several of these questions, also the last one, are, I think, demonstrating that the agroecology debate is also embedded in much broader debates. Yeah? For example, this whole question about the bioeconomy and land use and biomass availability. And what we are currently experiencing also in this emphasis project, which is one of the reasons why Philippe is here in Berlin, together with some other colleagues who are also in the audience, is that when we try to connect these different contexts, we constantly have to negotiate the system boundaries, and then also the relevant values and perspectives are constantly shifting and have to be renegotiated. And that's a very uneasy experience. And that's probably also one of the challenges to bring these agroecology debates into the broader discourse, because, I mean, psychologically, probably most people feel very uncomfortable if they have to operate or discuss outside their established categories and outside their established territories.
Yes.
So,
The
final
football-
question. What's the response? How can we...
But the problem is the football field is a bit too big and there is not enough player. But it's not a reason to play on a tennis system. So we have no choice. We have to play on the football field, but we are not enough. I agree. And so one of the options is to avoid dispersion. And so we have to work. I think we have to work more together to identify the key issues for today. So one of the key issues is the next CAP. One of the key issues is biodiversity. For example, if we are not working today on biodiversity, it will completely disappear from the landscape, and it is a big issue. Nitrogen, organic farming, and things like that. So probably we have to be a bit more modest in not trying to do what we like to do, but to say, okay, what are the key issues? What are the resources we need for these key issues? And I think that's, for example, very important in the choice of PhD topics. I'm sometimes completely upset by the kind of PhD topics of some students to say, today you are working on that. It will not be relevant.
So
it will be funny, but not relevant. So I'm a bit sorry about this way of planning, but spend more time deciding your purpose, your use, and it's a big job to decide. Am I useful? For example, I spend a lot of time on advocacy. I try to spend less time on advocacy. Today, for me, it was not advocacy. It was sharing something about practicalities that we can do together. But you can spend a lot of time advocacy to say we are in danger and things like that. But it's now no. So it's no more the time to do so. It's more the time to plan something, to have a strategy, to organize, as you mentioned. So we have to be clear in our mind. Goodwill is not sufficient. We need to be very strategic because we are a very small group of people.
I think that's a very good description of our role of science for the 21st century, but also in the spirit of Alexander von Humboldt. Before we close, I just wanted to alert you that the next Cosmos lecture is just around the corner. It will take place on the 5th of November. Together with the German Climate Consortium and the German Federal Ministry of Research and Education, in the context of the science year on the topic of freedom. And the title here is, I have to translate that because I have it only in German, Freedom and Protecting the Climate, How Can That Be Successful? Social science perspectives in interdisciplinary dialogue. So that's certainly to be very exciting. But I don't want to finish today without thanking Philippe Baret, and we also have a very small present for you before we leave you from the stage. And that's a very small recognition, but you will recognize the face on this present. So thank you very much, Philippe Baret, for a very inspiring talk and a very good interaction. And I hope you all enjoyed this and wish you a wonderful evening and some inspiring thoughts to take with you home or wherever. Good night and good luck.